Hello, everybody. My name's Milan Starcic. Welcome to Freedom Rising, a podcast dedicated to empowering individuals on the journey to personal growth, lasting serenity, and freedom from addiction. Tune in and join the movement. Your journey to freedom starts here. We neither represent, promote, or demote any 12-step program or organization. We are merely souls on the path of recovery with the desire to expand our lives and experiences and share them with you. Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to the 225th Recovery Freedom Rising podcast. I'm Milan Starcic with co-host Darrin C. Doing our first podcast here in 2026 together. From our list of fine topics that we've had there, today's topic is the value of making mistakes. Can you share what this topic means to you, Darrin, and why you're ecstatically doing cartwheels to come discuss this here today?
I'm ecstatically doing cartwheels, Milan, because I just love being here with you. That no matter what the topic is, right?
Yeah, there we go.
But concerning the topic, I don't want to get too much into it because I think we'll get a lot of juicy stuff out of the podcast. But what really intrigued me was when you sent me the topic. We don't talk about that too much in recovery. We talk about God and all of the recovery stuff, but we don't talk about making mistakes enough, I don't think. And which is sad because we're human and we're going to make mistakes, right? So I think it's a valuable topic to talk about, especially to the newcomer who's trying to get in here and get this thing going and is stumbling. Right. And so I think it's and even for us guys that have been around a little while that stumble. Right. So I think it's a great topic and I'm really excited to dive into it.
Yeah, me too. This topic was something that I'm not even sure I could have discussed before recovery. I grew up, my single talent as a child that I remember was mathematics. And I'm telling you right now, nobody was like, there's value in making mistakes. Not once in a math class did I ever hear that. Or did I ever feel it? Like my goal was to have perfection on a test. And when I got 97, it was like, what's wrong with me? And so now though, I really see the value in making mistakes kind of as like, almost like a spiritual realization that my errors aren't evidence of failure, but they're essential for lessons in humility. Like most growth is through discomfort, and learning requires mistakes, and kind of getting the understanding that perfection is really just like an ego's mask. There's a certain amount of ego and selfishness that's really involved with trying to be perfect or expecting others to be perfect, and not giving others the grace to actually be perfect inside themselves, and it's the mistakes that allows that grace to enter into our life. And in the view of surrender, that we are not perfect, that we are not our higher power, that we need to stumble, and that it allowing us to, one of my friends always says, the lessons and the blessings she gives gratitude for, and being able to be grateful for those mistakes as well as what you would consider a win certainly allows for much more joy in life. And in the view of loving completely, right? It's being able to offer ourselves love when we feel hurt from a mistake, and starting to actually treat ourselves like we treat other people sometimes, like sometimes I can overlook so many mistakes by others and just be crucifying myself about something. And so I think that it's a lesson in love to start to embrace these mistakes and to see the lessons in them. And I want to clarify, like I'm talking about making mistakes, not outright being hurtful to people and being like, oh, that was a mistake, because I do think that I would rather not learn on the treading on the hearts of others, intentionally and just disregarding them. Like but I'm talking about simple mistakes of me just trying to develop the use of these principles, trying to, work these steps in my life. And, it's never going to be perfect. And it's definitely not perfect today. Right. I'm going to leave it there because I think we're actually, you know what? Can I read one paragraph here from something that I
Absolutely.
just read the other day? And I think it
Sure.
has to do with this. We get caught up in ambition, which disregards the interest of others and is unscrupulous about the methods used to reach financial or career goals. It leads to false objectives in chosen service. The results which ought to accompany the workings of the Holy Spirit are manifestly absent. This leads to false activity to cover up an inward sense of dissatisfaction, futility, and frustration, which haunts all of us when our lives are run on self-effort. We feel we do not need anyone's help. This is the result of too small a conception of our higher power and too large a conception of our own capacities. And that was something that was just in a reading that I was doing yesterday. And when I read that, I'm like, man, that certainly applies to what Darrin and I have come to talk about today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you want to
Absolutely.
start the questions or do you want me to?
I'll start. How about that? We'll switch it
Okay.
around this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, question one,
Mm.
is it always a bad thing when we make a mistake?
Yes. So I definitely will answer now that is definitely not. You know, first of all, the very concept of our actions being like correct or mistakes, just looking at that fundamentally, it's like, how do I know where my action is going to lead? And so I think for myself, my goal now is maybe less outcome based in my life and more principle based. Did I stay loving in that moment? Did I surrender in that moment? Am I being forgiving in my actions? Like those three things right now for me, are really the basis of how I'm looking at what I'm doing. And so when I'm making mistakes on them, I try to make amends right away. Some of my friends call me Step 10 Starcic, and because I will not leave something like undiscussed about it because I you know I'm listening to that book or been listening this week to that new pair of glasses by Chuck C. I'm not sure if you've listened to that, but he says I can't afford it. Like when he's talking about doing certain things, and I feel the same way. Like I can't afford to let myself get in a really bad situation inside my brain. And so I need to stem it right away and stop that. I need to cut that resentment down while it's a grass, not when it's a huge tree. And so for me, yeah, like mistakes are essential for learning because first of all, it teaches me what I don't want in my life, and second of all, it shows me the discomfort of making that lesson, and hopefully I haven't irreparably hurt somebody in that process for me to learn, right? But I just don't think it's realistic for us to think we're going to be perfect ever. Yeah.
That's a great answer. Great answer, Milan. So, is it a bad thing when we make mistakes? And I'm with you. The answer is a resounding no, or not
Mm.
necessarily. I mean, sometimes if I make mistakes like you were talking about before, like I intentionally go out and hurt somebody, then yes, that's a bad thing, right? So,
Yeah,
but
there's that
but
strike back with the wife we don't need to do
yeah.
some days.
Right. But just the mistakes that I make unknowingly, I don't think they're necessarily always a bad thing. And I've been around here a long time, Milan. I've been in the
Yeah.
ring 20 years, and I hardly ever hear people talk about this, but this comes straight out of the book. It says when we try hard and fail, that's one of the greatest credits of all. Why don't we talk about that to the newcomer? I guess because it doesn't sound good, but he goes on to say the pains of failure are converted to assets, and out of them we receive the stimulation to move forward. In other words, it's the mistakes and the pain of the mistakes that propel me into spiritual progress, right?
Mm,
And so, we've probably talked about this before on this podcast, but let me go back and reiterate it again. So, me and my wife got here in 2006, 20 years ago. She's a one ship wonder. She's got 20 years uninterrupted. I am not as smart as her, Milan. So coming up on 4 years, I got on, you've heard it, same story you've heard all around the room. Stop calling my sponsor, stop doing the deal. I lost touch with the power,
yeah.
and the insanity returned, and I went back out again. This was in 2009.
Yeah.
And at that time, Milan, it was the most horrible thing that ever happened to me. I lost
Mm,
my sponsees. I lost my service positions. I was 2 weeks away from getting married to my wife. We were engaged at the time. I mean, just like my whole world was just like in shambles. And if you would have asked me in 2009, hey, do you think this mistake is a good thing? I would have been like, Milan, you're out of your mind, bro. This was horrible. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. How could I do this? In that pity party and just, oh, my world is over. But fast forward now, I just picked up 16 years. 16 years later, it was literally the greatest thing that happened to me, Milan, because it's
mm,
exactly what we're talking about. It propelled me, just like the book said, it motivated
mm,
me. I don't want to go back there. I don't want to live like that anymore. And it propelled me to get in the middle of this program and stay here, which I've done for 16 years continuously, is stayed in the middle because of
mm,
that mistake, because of that relapse. And so, it's all what we do with it. Like, right, if I have make a mistake and I don't use it for good, to progress, to
mm,
to change, then the mistake wasn't good for me. I'm probably
mm,
apt to repeat it again. But if I can say, you know what, just like you were talking about, I don't want to be like that anymore. I don't like that. I don't like the way that made me feel, whatever, and use that so our higher power can use that to progress us on the right path. Right.
mm. Yeah, like, do we learn from it and do we amend our actions? Like that's a really big and a valuable point that you just made that I think is super important for somebody new out there. Is that it's like, are you seeking to grow from that mistake, right? Are you actually looking at it and bringing the results of it to your awareness? And are you willing to amend your actions for that growth to occur? Or even if you don't feel that you can, are you willing to surrender? Are you willing to surrender that behavior? You know, I think it's some really important points there that you brought up that is really important about noting.
I'm glad you said amend your action, right? I love that statement, because when we say amends in this program, we think it's about apologizing and telling other people I was wrong, I'm sorry, or
Mm,
whatever. No, that's not the amend. It's just what you just said. It's about me changing my action, taking responsibility
mm,
for it, and then making a change. If I come up and do something to you wrong and say, oh, Milan, I'm sorry, I was wrong,
mm.
and then a week later I'm doing it again to you, that's not an amends.
Yeah,
That's just a shallow apology,
that's
right?
right. That's right. And
So,
that's really just an act of selfishness to make yourself
absolutely.
temporarily feel better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Okie dokie. Now, here's my first question for you. Living clean teaches us that our mistakes can be our greatest teachers if we're willing to learn. If you looked at your latest error as a specialized lesson designed just for growth, what is the gentle wisdom you're ready to receive, Darrin?
It's a good question. Let me just answer this by telling a story, Milan. So when I
Yeah.
got here years ago, man, I'm at a world convention from another program, and it's a marathon meeting, like 3 in the morning, and I was in this meeting, and this guy was, and I had maybe like a month sober, right? And this guy was talking about, sponsorship not being in the big book. And so I got all in my feelings and was like, who is this guy? Who does he think he is? And so I got sort of angry. And anyways, the convention ended, and I went to my regular Monday meeting, And this guy just happened to show up in this meeting. And this is the story, Milan. It's the craziest story. He said he's from California. He had like 10 years sober. He ran a treatment center. He was in town for the convention. He just happened to be staying another day. He just happened to pick up the directory, and he just happened to find that meeting that I was in. At the end of that meeting, he just happened to come up and ask me if I would give him a ride home. Now, if that isn't a God thing, that's right.
Yeah.
And this was the guy that I just had a resentment against like the day before.
Mm,
And in that ride home, Milan, he gave me one of the single most greatest pieces of advice I've ever received in the program. And he said, everything that I go through, good and bad, God's trying to teach me something.
mm,
Wow. And so that's the answer to your question. When I make a mistake, well, let me back up. When I make a mistake and get past my ego and my self pity, right?
yeah.
Which takes a few minutes sometimes, right? Because I'm my own worst critic, like you talked about before. But once I get past all that, then I can look at the mistake and say, okay, God, what are you trying to teach me? And so I really try to use every situation, good and bad. What are you trying to teach me? And so when I make a mistake, instead of getting, hard on myself, or I'm a failure, I'm a loser, I'm not going to make it. Okay, God, what are you trying to teach me? What are you trying to
Mm,
get me to learn here? Because look, Milan, my higher power loves me and wants me to do better. And
mm,
so he's not out to punish me, not my higher power. And so he's trying to gently correct me back on the path through this mistake. And so I think if we always will look at, instead of looking at the mistake or looking at ourselves and beating ourselves up, okay, God, what are you trying to teach me? What do you want me to learn? What do you want me to change? How do you want me to, grow spiritually out of this mistake? So I hope that answered your question.
I think it did. And you know as well as I do, it's not about answering the question, it's about sharing what it inspires you to share. And I think that was a beautiful story for somebody to hear, you know. So I'll read the question again here. Living clean teaches that our mistakes can be our greatest teachers if we are willing to learn. If I looked at my latest error as a specialized lesson designed just for growth, what is the gentle wisdom I am ready to receive? And I love what you said there, Darren. I love what you said, and for myself, I want to take it one step further in that not only to see the lesson in it, but for myself, quite recently, I realized, I am a seeker. I want to be learning constantly, right? But that should not come at the expense of ever having serenity. Like, and for myself, one of the things that I came to the realization, it was this week, and I realized it when I was writing a song the next day after something had happened. And for myself, what I realized is like sometimes constantly seeking robs the peace and serenity of right now by desiring more. Like, because then what happens is my learning becomes an addiction. Just like with drugs, where I always needed more instead of feeling at a point, it's like, having a day where I'm just like, today is entirely good enough, whether I learn or not. I realized for me to shut down that addict part of my mind, it was necessary for me to just go, hey, like today is good enough. Like I don't have to look at the what I need to improve list every day because it started robbing me of my joy of that moment. And for me, when I did that, it was like this warm feeling of actual joy and contentment flooded into me, and I knew for me at that moment. I knew that that was a correct decision. It's like actually being able to evaluate when that push for growth is diminishing peace, joy, and serenity. I'm starting to actually look at that because, that in itself to me is a mistake if peace, joy, and serenity are my goal, right?
No, I love that, Milan. This is not it's not an intellectual thing. It's like you're talking about. We're not trying to like figure out something intellectually. It's a
Yeah.
heart thing, right?
Yeah.
It's when I make the mistakes, my higher power will show me, hey,
Mm.
you need to change this. I don't need to go out every day and try to say, okay, what I need to change today, how do I need to grow today? Because you're right.
Yeah.
My whole goal is to stay in the moment. And so I think what I'm seeking is this relationship with God in the moment. And through
Yeah.
that, like you said, He'll let my heart know when I need to work on and change something
Mm.
instead of, like you said, that intellectual, what do I need to change and what all that. Because yeah, it's we don't understand sometimes, Milan, that this thing is not about drugs or alcohol. Right? It's this a symptom. I can be addicted to anything and everything all the
Even
time.
recovery.
Yes. And so I can, so let me just, I want to tell you one, so you brought something to my mind real quick. So I
Yeah.
was in a meeting one time, and this was in my first 3 years before I relapsed. And this guy was talking about hiding out in recovery. And I'm like, who does this fool think he is? You can't hide out in recovery. How can you do too much in recovery? Blah, blah, blah. And then when I relapsed and came back, I understood what he was talking about. It was exactly what you were talking about. Is I can get so caught up into checking the boxes,
Mm.
doing the recovery, and I get addicted to the recovery, the meetings and the functions and all that, and stop
Mm.
looking inward at my own personal spiritual growth. And then I'm
Mm.
just hiding out. I'm just using the recovery as a drug, right? Just like you were talking about. And so I got
Mm.
to be careful that I don't get caught up in substituting my higher power and spiritual growth with external things. So I really am glad that you brought that up. That was really insightful.
Well, I find our conversations very inspiring. I feel grateful to be here with you as we met through gratitude. And, it just seems like such a ridiculously amazing way to meet, you know? And, but I've always loved our talks and it just inspires what you say inspires me to maybe even, be able to verbalize some of what I'm thinking in a greater capacity. I find sometimes that there can be a real ping pong effect with these discussions, and I find it amazing. Okay, your question now.
Sure. So if I grow spiritually through making mistakes, then should I just make mistakes on purpose?
Haha, no. For me, now for me though, for me it is the mistakes through attempting, like literally practicing these principles in all our affairs, right? That practice is going to involve mistakes, right? I don't learn by just always being dishonest. I learn from trying to be honest, and when I fail at it, seeing the consequences of it, the ramifications of it, that's my education. Or even watching someone else have a moment of honesty and how it changes their relationships, and it's like that with all the principles. Like we're going to stumble, but I think that first of all, that attempt at it, like like I am 100% not perfect, Milan, saying it right now, but I'm 100% way better Milan than Milan was 3 years ago, and so it is through the execution of that practice that I have glimmers of serenity, joy, contentment, peace, and love in a way that I never had before. And it's like without those glimmers, I wouldn't um there wouldn't be a reward system like to further my awakening, like if it was all like fully awake or nothing, man, how many people would ever get straight, man? Like there's a series of awakenings, I think, for most people. I mean, and thankfully so, like most donkeys need a carrot before they get to the end. and and that's okay, and so I think Bill really corrected himself. It's in step 6 in the 12 by 12 where he talks about not like aimless progress, but to like lift our head towards what our higher power can be, and use that as like a beacon for us to walk towards progress towards perfection. And I think that, it doesn't mean whip yourself for being imperfect. What it means is that, like, I can progress from being a nice guy to a shithead, and that's still progress, right? Like, and so I have to be looking where I want these principles to take me without banking my satisfaction on ever getting to the end, you know?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and I agree with all that. And just to add to that, I'm also not supposed to use progress per perfection as a reason to procrastinate and not do anything, right? Because I'll hear that sometime from newcomers. Oh, I hadn't worked on my 4 step in 3 weeks, but it's progress, not perfection. No, that's not what that means.
Oh, that
It
drives me
doesn't mean
crazy.
use that as an excuse. So yeah, I'm glad you said that. So
No,
if I
and quite frankly, that's not progress.
right. No, it's justification rationalization, but we use it and say it's progress, right?
and
Okay, yeah,
and procrastination is a form of selfishness.
right, right.
You know,
Which
I
most everything boils down to selfish and self-centered, right?
yeah, yeah, but definitely that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, if I grow spiritually through making mistakes, should I make mistakes on purpose? And you answered it very eloquently, Milan. It's no. We talked about that in a last podcast or two, the deliberate manufacture of chaos, and he says avoid deliberately making mistakes, but to avoid the deliberate manufacture of chaos. And so mistakes aren't deliberate, they're accidental, right? Just like what you talked about. A mistake is when I'm really trying to do something better and I stumble and fall. Right? It's like some people will say, "Oh, that's old behavior," and then my answer is, "It's not old behavior if you're still doing it, right? You're still just doing what you were doing, right?" So it's only old behavior if I'm trying to do something different and I stumble and fall back into the old behavior. Then I can call it old behavior. But if I'm just living that way, it's not old behavior. It's the way I'm living, right? And so
Mm.
it's just like what you were talking about. If I'm just making mistakes and that's just who I am, then that's not a mistake. I'm not doing the recovery thing at all. A mistake is when I'm trying to really grow and be more what my higher power wants me to do, and I stumble and fall because I'm human. That's a mistake. And so I think sometimes we need to clarify what a mistake is, because you got some people that are not doing anything and they're continuing to hurt people and continuing to live whatever way they want to live. That's not a mistake, right? You're back in the old manner of living, and that's a whole nother topic, right? A
Mm.
mistake is when I'm in the recovery side, when I'm in the spiritual side, when I'm trying to do what my higher power wants me to, but I fall and mess up because I'm human and I make a mistake. It's not something that I wanted to do. So,
I am thinking that it'll be fun right now for hold on to define mistake, because here we go. An action or judgment that is misguided or wrong. So, I would say that we're not doing our principled action if we're misguided.
right.
you know, like, we're probably not having conscious contact at that moment. Like, let's be honest about that, right? Okay, are you ready for question?
So,
We often use our mistakes as a way to punish ourselves, which blocks our spiritual sunlight. Are you willing to surrender your self condemnation and trust that your higher power loves you even more in your moments of struggle?
great question, Milan. And I'm glad that all the stuff that we talk about is we're just regurgitating what the first 100 did, right? It's clear cut direction, so they already figured all this out, right? It's just our job to try to remember what they told us and what the book tells us, because he's real clear. He says, I need to stop making unreasonable demands upon God, on others, and that's usually where we stop. Okay, I don't want to tell God what to do, and I want to be nice to Milan and stop trying to control his life. But that's not what he says. He says unreasonable demands on God, others, and myself. See, I forget that I'm not supposed to be making unreasonable demands on myself, and I'm my own worst critic. And I remember, Milan, when I got back from the relapse, one of the old timers said, "Look, don't beat yourself up. Let us do that. We know when to quit." Right?
Oh, whoa.
Because
I
I don't know
love
when
that.
to quit. Yeah, so I
I've
don't know
never
when to
heard
quit when I.
someone say that.
Yeah, yeah. And so I let my sponsor beat me up because he knows when to quit. I let
Yeah.
the men around me that are my mentors beat me up because they know when to quit. If I start getting down on myself, it's just like you talked about a few podcasts ago. I just sit in this massive pity party, and I'm just this horrible person, and so I really need to understand that I am important to God too, and stop making unreasonable demands on myself. I'm doing the best that I can do. Now, let me preface that by saying, if I'm doing the best that I can do. If I'm not doing the best that I can do, then that's a whole nother thing. Then I need to get back on track doing the best that I can do. But if I'm doing the best that I can do, I gotta stop being so hard on myself. So I'm a perfectionist by nature, Milan. A lot of us come in here that are like that. Everything has got to be just perfect. And recovery has stripped me from that, right? Of not expecting you to be perfect and not expecting the world to be perfect and letting things just sort of be what they are. But I still fall back into that. I'm supposed to be perfect. I'm supposed to act perfect. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that. I'm on the podcast. I'm not supposed to lash out at my wife. No, I'm human. I'm just like everybody else on the planet. It doesn't matter how long I've been here, how much time I have. I'm human. And so I have to stop being so hard on myself. Right.
I love that. Yeah, so we often use our mistakes as a way to punish ourselves, which blocks our spiritual sunlight. Am I willing to surrender my self condemnation and trust my higher power loves me even more in my moments of struggle? It's funny. I had a friend's partner on the podcast just a couple weeks ago, and the topic was grace. And the one thing that he was really adamant about, just to try and share to people, because I think a lot of people mistake it, is that we don't have to qualify for grace. Like if our higher power is all loving, we get that grace sheerly by, like, the higher power's amazingness and presence. And so, like, we're the ones who judge ourselves. Our higher power doesn't judge us. And so, like, I am for sure my greatest self-condemner, and one of the things I realized through that process is that my self judgment is work I need to do on self forgiveness. Like, it's easy for me to judge myself when I'm already putting myself in a box of who I was based on what I did in the past, not what I can be right now. And so for myself, it's the process of, like, I've shared it before on the podcast, but, like, I'm praying for the willingness to fully forgive myself, and to find that in my heart, because I'm telling you that, some people say, oh, you can't love others till you love yourself. Well, I certainly can forgive others faster than I can forgive myself. Like, I find the opposite true with forgiveness. And so it's a journey for me on that. And that self-condemnation comes out of associating myself with my past self, you know? And so for me, it's an act of love that I'm kind of calibrating all the time, and part of that is coming to me through two-way prayer, doing my two-way prayer every morning, and in a way, also in my step tens, and just actually seeing where I'm not being loving, because that self-condemnation is not an act of love. And one thing that I've definitely been learning is that fear and love are mutually exclusive. I cannot, like, have fear and love in that exact same moment. And so if I'm not acting loving, then I'm definitely acting on fear. Fear I'm not worthy. Fear I'm not the person that I think I should be. Fear I'm not growing fast enough. Just a ton of things there. I'll leave that one there.
Great, Milan. Another program I go to, that in one of their readings, they say it wasn't until I was able to forgive myself that I was truly able to grow in my sobriety. And I think
Mhm.
that that's true, man, that I'm the one that blocks that. God doesn't block that. I love in the book, he says, God doesn't make too hard of terms with those who seek him. So if
Oh
I'm
yeah,
struggling with that, I'm the one making too hard of terms, right?
yeah.
I'm the one blocking God. I'm the one blocking the grace. I'm the one that's being too hard on myself. And like you said in the other question, blocking the power, right? It's
Mhm.
not God doing that, it's me. And so
Mhm.
I have to, like you said, forgive myself and move on and be able to grow. As long as I hold the self-condemnation, like you say, there's no love in that, there's no growth in that, there's no spirituality in that.
You know, the one thing that I really love about that new pair of glasses there by Chuck C. Anybody who has Spotify, they actually, it's the only place I found the audiobook of that. They have the audiobook of a new pair of glasses on Spotify. And so I just wanted to plug that for anybody out there who didn't even know Spotify had audiobooks. I didn't, you know, silly guy. But, you know, he really expounds about service and love, you know, and those two things, you know, like if you're having a problem with yourself, it's because you're thinking of yourself, you know, like bottom line. Yeah. Okay, you got another question for me?
Sir, so what should I do if I make a mistake?
Well, you know, for me, one of the things I'm trying to do is I'm trying to forgive as quickly as I can. You know, as an old timer there who's not with us anymore, Sandy Beach. You know, he used to speak a lot about forgiveness in his tapes, and you know, trying to forgive the fastest. And me and my friend Andrew on the podcast, we say there's less paperwork the faster we can forgive, and we should certainly hate paperwork. You know, I can't, and as Chuck C would say, I can't afford to let that build to resentment, right? And so for me, I take a pretty good look at myself. Like I'm not going to kid. I don't think I'm ridiculously hard on myself, but I do think that I'm trying to bring an honest awareness for the first time in my life about my actions, the consequences of my actions, about my words, the consequences of my words, and what and how they're affecting others, right? And so, well, I take a look at that, and I see, like, you know, right now I'm using those four absolutes that the Oxford group had. You know, is it honest? Is it pure? Is it unselfish? And is it loving? And one of the things that I never realized until quite recently is that there is no, like, I I was brought to my awareness earlier that there is no kind of loving and there is no kind of honest, but there is no kind of surrender. Like like either you surrender it or you don't. Like a surrender, just like honesty or love, it implies a pureness to it. And so, you know, like, am I actually letting that mistake go? Like, you know, but also, am I bringing awareness to it? Am I making amends for it if it's needed? And, and, and what of those four things for me, those four: honest, pure, unselfish, and loving, which of those four did I cross? You know? And sometimes, uh, I can be ignorantly, like selfishly unloving in some words I say and not realize it till after because it was like out of ignorance that I wasn't considering the other people's feelings.
Oh, that's great. Excuse me. I love the word awareness. I have one of my sponsees that like always uses that word. He said that's like one of the greatest things that he's gotten out of the program is the awareness, right?
Yeah.
And and that is the answer to the question, what should I do if I make a mistake? The book says the first thing I need to do is analyze the mistake, right? How many times before I got here I ever analyzed the mistake? Ever. I would just say, well, if Milan wouldn't have said that, then I wouldn't have had to do that. I justified it, right? So I never analyzed the mistake, right? But I really want the newcomer to hear this, or maybe somebody that's been around and has forgot this, right? Been around a long time and forgot this. The book says the people that do not recover from what? Fill in the blank. Whatever you're trying to recover from are people that can't get honest with themselves, that don't have that awareness, that don't analyze the mistake. right? Do you remember in the very beginning, he says, there is a solution. What's the solution? Self-searching, loving and pride, confession of shortcoming. If I can't get that self-searching, if I can't look at myself honestly, like you were talking about, and say, hey, you know what, that wasn't right. I shouldn't have said that to my wife, or I shouldn't have did this to this person, or I shouldn't have whatever. If I can't honestly get to that place, I'm not going to be able to ever move forward. And so that's the first thing, is analyze the mistake, self-searching, get honest with myself about the fact that it was a mistake, right? And then I should ask my higher power, because the book says now I have this relationship with the power, help me to learn from this mistake, guide me how to get better through this mistake, show me what to do different, right? And get that my higher power. And then I need to talk to my sponsor or somebody else. In my case, it's my sponsor, because I have a great relationship with my sponsor, but whoever it is, I need to talk to somebody about it immediately, because that's what step 10 says, right? Then I discuss it at once with somebody, so that I can get an unbiased opinion of how to grow, how to change, what to do. Do I need to make the amends or not? How to make the amends to get that. And so that's that self-searching, leveling my pride, confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation, right?
Beautiful. Woo! Dude, you're on fire today. Did you have a good sleep last night?
I did.
I can tell. I can tell. Okay, you ready for a question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the 12 by 12 suggests that our past failures become our greatest tools for helping others. How might the mistake you are currently dwelling on become a bridge of hope for someone else who feels just as lost as you do now?
Question, Milan. And I don't expect anybody to see that in the moment that they're making the mistake, of how sometime in the future this is going to be their greatest asset.
Mm-hmm.
But let me tell you, it will be. Whether you can see it now or not, it will
Mm-hmm.
be. I mean, that's literally one of the promises, right? I'll not regret the past, nor to shut the door on it. Well, hold on. If I did all these horrible things in the past, why am I not going to regret them and want to like push them under the rug? Because they're my greatest assets today. They're the things that I can teach other people, right? And so we don't use this word a lot in the program, Milan, because it seems like it's a churchy word, but it's just a regular word, and the word is redemption, right? And so, how do I redeem myself? We've talked about it before. I did some. I wasn't a great father necessarily when my child was super little, when I was out there in my addiction, right? How do I change that? How do I redeem myself from that? And redemption happens in two ways. Number one, I stay sober and become in the recovery and become a great father to her and redeem that situation. But the true redemption, Milan, is when I can help another man not go through the same mistakes I made, because I have this knowledge and this wisdom from the mistakes to be able to help him to not make the same mistakes. So the redemption comes when I can use my past failures to help other people maybe not have those failures, or at least maybe not have those failures to the same degree as I did. And then I can redeem some of my past, because I can't ever go back and change the past. It's the
Mm-hmm.
past. But the more that I do good, the more that I help other people. Maybe I help a guy that his baby is 1 year old, and he gets sober, and his daughter doesn't have to see that at 5 like mine did. That's redemption. I use my past mistakes. Well, let me rephrase that. God uses my past mistakes to help me to help others, right? So I love that question. I love the whole mistakes being one of the greatest assets to help others today.
Now, that just made me have another sub question here for you. Do you believe in true redemption, or do you feel that restitution is sufficient?
Yeah. So let me explain the redemption that I'm talking about. The redemption that
Mm,
I'm talking about is internal.
okay.
So yes, you are correct. It's the restitution, right? I am
Mm,
paying my penance, if you will, for the
yeah.
things that I've done, the
Yeah.
restitution. But in that restitution, in the fact that now I have a daughter that thinks I'm the greatest dad on the planet, now that I have sponsees that I've helped not go through the same things that I've done, through that restitution,
Mm-hmm.
My heart gets redemption. See, I don't
Mm-hmm.
have to feel like a horrible person for all those things that I did. I'm truly able to forgive myself. It's redemption of my heart through the restitution.
Okay, I like that you clarified that because I do feel that with others, we may never truly get to redeem ourselves. Like, and that shouldn't be the necessary. I think restitution is definitely due, but the way that you're talking about that being that posture inside your heart, I think that's really important, and that's why I asked that question because I knew you would be able to verbally clarify that very perfectly. Thank you.
Welcome. And it's also, Milan, it's the same thing with forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
Forgiveness is not for you, right?
Mhm.
Forgiveness is internal. When I'm
Yeah.
forgiving somebody, I'm not trying to make them like me or forgive me or be okay with what I did to them. When I ask somebody for forgiveness in the ninth step,
Mhm.
it's so my heart can have forgiveness of that situation. Now, if they accept the forgiveness and they give it back to me, that's just an added bonus. But it's just like you said, the redemption, the forgiveness, all those things are internal for my spiritual
Mhm.
growth, for my heart,
Mhm.
right? So that I can forgive myself over these situations. Just like when Bill says, if I go in and I try to make the amends to somebody and they throw me out of their office,
Mhm.
it's water under the bridge because I did my part. See, I can still forgive myself even though they didn't forgive me because forgiveness is internal, redemption is internal.
I love that. Okay, the 12 by 12 suggests that our past failures become our greatest tools for helping others. How might the mistakes I'm currently dwelling on become a bridge of hope for someone else who feels just as lost as I do right now? And I really think that I don't have to invent the wheel to like driving a car. And like if we all had to invent the 12 steps without there being a book, we would not have benefited from the mistakes that Bill and Bob and Ebby and them all made, right? And that's like literally having a program is a shining example of a bridge of hope created by other people's mistakes, you know? And so I don't claim to be any sort of spiritual guru or anything, but I'm a person on the quest for growth. And if I have an epiphany that has greatly helped my life, I am going to turn around and use it to help other people. And to the best of my ability, whether those people take it or use it or not, I'm not creating that expectation and that premeditated resentment of whether they do or not. I'm okay by myself. You can put me in a room with my guitar, my computer, and I can just be self-amused and happy as a pig and shit. Like it. But the thing is that there are things that I feel are drastically life-changing that have occurred to me inside this 28 months. And when one of them happens, do I turn and pass it on to my sponsees? Do I talk about it with someone like you? Do I share about it at a meeting? You're damn right I do. Because when someone else does that for me, it could save me the worst day of my life. You know what I mean? And I'm okay with learning from your mistakes, you know, because when it's a powerful enough lesson, I hear it, man. I hear it. Like there's times where I'm just sitting there and someone's talking and it is just like a bolt of lightning where I'm like, wow, I will never be able to unsee what they just showed me. And it didn't have to be my mistake. So I really think that, that also highlights the importance of sharing, the importance of us going to a meeting and showing our vulnerability on what occurred and the message that came from that. When they say share the mess and the message, it's about what we've learned from our mistakes. It's not like take a shit on the meeting and walk away. It's like show them how clean you can wipe.
No, that's great, man. You're on fire today too. You must have got a good sleep as well.
I've got a good sleep 3 nights in a row right now. I'm doing good.
No, really, seriously, man, I'm glad that you brought that up, Milan, because so when I relapsed back in 2006, I was like in the lowest pity part, self pity, just this is horrible. I'm not gonna be able to make it. I'm gonna, never gonna be able to get back in recovery. Just all those things, angry at myself, just angry at the world. And so I called my sponsor and I said, hey, I picked up a new sponsor. And I said, hey, can I go pick up a Desire chip at this other meeting where nobody knows me? And he's like, absolutely not. You go to your main meeting and you go face all those people and you pick up the chip. And when walked in there, I was sick to my stomach. I didn't want to be there. And one of my mentors, the guy that was here when I got here, Matt O, he came up to me because he had heard about it. And he said to me, Milan, he said, look, I had more time than that when I relapsed, and I made it back, and I'm here, and I got all this time. You'll be okay. That single sharing of that mistake forever. I don't know that I would be here, Milan. I don't know if I'd have been able to start over. I don't know. We sometimes underestimate the importance of sharing that struggle, sharing that
Mm-mm.
mistake. And had he not come up to me, I didn't know that he had really had time before relapse. I just knew he had, like, at that time, I don't know, maybe 10 years, 8 years, I don't know what it was. I just knew he had that much time. I didn't know he had time before relapse came back, and now he had some pretty good time put together. And had he not come and shared that with me, and it was like you just said, it was literally an epiphany. It was literally that little spark in my soul saying, okay, you can do this. You can make it back. You can start over. And so we underestimate how much power we have to other people that are struggling by sharing our mistakes and the things that we went to. And like you said, how we got up and out of that, right?
Mm.
Because I don't think that the meeting is a place either where you just could come puke on the meeting of your mess and then walk away, because we're
Yep.
supposed to be sharing our experience, strength, and hope. But we are supposed to be honest. And so it's exactly what you just said. I come and I share all this
Mm.
mess on the meeting, but then I share the solution of how I got up and out of that and how I'm now on the other side of that to give people hope. And Matt gave me hope that day that I can make it. And so I really love you bringing that. It's really powerful. What you just said is like the weight of sharing our struggles with other people could be the thing that they need to hear that day that saves their life or not.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%, man. Okie dokie, it's a question from you time.
Yes, sir. If I make a mistake, does that mean I'm not working a good program?
I would almost say the opposite, really. At this point in our conversation, if I'm making mistakes and looking at them, bringing it to awareness, and amending or growing from it, then that is a good program to me. Like trying, trying and trying and trying. Like you said, you said earlier that it's about trying our hardest, right? And for me, it's right in the word practice the principles. Like that is practice. I'm a musician, and for me to have some of the songs I have right now, I had to make millions of mistakes in order for my body, my vocal cords, everything inside me to move in the way it does to make that sound. And I don't see my life or recovery as any different. It just has a different package, Like one of the things that I'm really seeing uh, as identical is that this program is teaching me how to create harmony in life, just like I try to create harmony in music. And the only way I'll know what's not harmonious in life is by making that mistake and hearing it be out of tune with the rest of existence around me. And so, I think that it is, first of all, one last thing I want to say, not first of all, but last of all, is that some people really get angry when people go to a meeting and they're very positive and they're not sharing on something negative. Everybody's life is in a cycle. And I think that there's a lot of unfair judgment on that because, some days There are the people in the troughs in the meeting, and they need to hear that positive message, you know? And I think if we're all just taking different turns at being the ones up or down, it'll provide a greater balance to the meetings than just like, you know, a real negative one and a real positive one, or whatever. And so I think that celebrating our victories with our message is just as important as what we learn from our mistakes.
Absolutely, Milan. No, no, absolutely. I think that's what makes this program work so well is the people sharing different places that they're at. I mean, I go if I'm in a meeting, I'm in a good spot. I tell people, "Hey, man, life is great. Everything is going great. Recovery has really made my life great." And then maybe 3 weeks later, I'm going through some crap, and I say, "Hey, I'm going through some crap, but this is what I'm doing to get out of it, and this is how the program has showed me to get through it." And so I think you're right. It's equally as important to share both.
Mm,
Um, so the question, if I make a mistake, does that mean I'm not working a good program? So, we all got our little sayings. After you've been around a little while, you'll come up with little sayings that everybody's used to you being your saying. And so I have two of them that I always say. I always say my mind's out to kill me, right? So that's one of mine, right? But the other one I say is the highest level I'm ever going to achieve in this program is human. And I don't know if I say it for other people or if I say it to remind myself, Milan, because again, I'm my own worst critic. I think I'm supposed to be perfect. I think been around here this long. I'm supposed to do it. No, I'm human. And so if I make a mistake, I got to let myself off the hook, right?
mm,
Doesn't mean I'm not working a good program, right? Now, with that being said, right, if I'm not trying to grow from them, if I'm not don't have that self-awareness, I'm not talking to my higher power, my sponsor, and trying to correct them and grow, then I'm not working a good program. I'm just like we talked about before. I'm just living in this life of deliberate manufacture of chaos and mistakes, right? But if
mm.
I'm truly seeking God and I'm truly doing my best, then I fall, then that has no reflection on my program, right? It's I like that Bill says sort of like what you said earlier, Milan. Bill says
Mm.
the measuring stick is not what I'm doing right now, perfect or not. It's am I better than I was when I got here? That's like,
Yeah.
oh, if that's the measuring strip, then I'm doing really measuring stick, then I'm doing really good, right? But sometimes I make the measuring stick about what I'm doing right here, and then I'm like,
Mm,
oh, I'm not doing good. I'm like, no, I'm doing way better than when I got here, and I'm still human, and I'm still going to grow for things. And I'm glad that we talked about that already, and they put that in the book.
mm,
It's spiritual progress, not perfection, right?
mm.
Bill says I need to walk towards perfection, no matter how haltingly I walk.
Yeah.
That's huge for me, right? Haltingly means I'm going to trip and fall. I'm going to skin my knee. I'm going to sit down on the ground and stop for a day and not even take a step forward. But I'm moving in the right direction. I'm
Yep.
trying to be what my higher power wants me to be. I'm trying to be a better human. I'm trying, like you said, to live in harmony with the world. But I'm not always going to do that. And I'm going to make mistakes because I'm human. And that's fine. Maybe I sit there for a day, but then I just get back up and start walking forward again. Right.
I love that, man. Woo, what a beauty session we got going. Okie dokie. So true freedom is loving yourself, not because you're perfect, but because you're worthy. Loving exactly as you are, worthy of loving exactly, worthy of love, just exactly as you are. Can you set the intention to speak to yourself with the same kindness and patience you would offer your best friend after they made a mistake?
No, I'm trying to, Milan. I wish I had a better answer than that, but no,
Ugh.
seriously, all kidding aside, it's hard, man. I mean, selfish and self-centered is the root of my problem. And when I get here and I start to unpack all that, I think it's because I'm trying to control the world and everything revolves around me and the way I'm, treating other people. But it takes a while in recovery to realize what you said earlier, that not loving myself, not giving myself grace, not letting myself off the hook is the same form of, self-centeredness, right? And selfishness. And so, you know, I think I love that. This is one of my favorite lines in the book, Milana. We don't talk about this in the meetings. You don't hear it much because it's really not, doesn't have a lot of meat into it, but it personally applies as to me. And it's like anytime that I'm playing the big shot or anytime that I'm got any amount of success, I remember that all the success is from my higher power. That when I got here, I deserved nothing. I didn't deserve happiness. I didn't deserve sobriety. I didn't deserve my wife. That everything that I got good comes from God. And that's supposed to be, he puts that in the book as an ego check when things start getting good. But what I've learned after being around here a long time is I flip that also to the other side when I'm feeling unworthy and when I made a mistake and when I'm down on myself, that it's that same higher power. You said it, that he loves me just as much when I'm not doing good as when I'm doing good, right? His love for me is limitless, right? It's unconditional. It's not whether I'm
Mm,
doing good or whether I'm doing bad. He just loves me, period. Right.
mhm,
And so I use that when I'm down and I'm making mistakes. I use that same thing. Hey, you know what? God still loves me. I'm worthy because he says I'm worthy, not because of
mm,
the fact that I made this mistake or didn't make the mistake. Is because he's allowed me to be here. And I'll end with this, Milan. This is something that really helped me early on is, and I use this with my sponsees all the time. It's like, I'll ask him, well, do you think that God has forgiven you for these things that you've done? They're like, oh, I don't know. I don't think he can, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, hold on. When is the last time you had 6 months sober and you didn't think about drinking or drugging? Where did that come from? So your
mm,
higher power has already forgiven you. You just have to forgive yourself. And so I try to live in that. I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have this, all the things that we did before we got here. If our higher power didn't love us at our depths of our mistakes, we wouldn't be here. So just the fact that me and you are here on this podcast proves that he loves me even when I'm messing up, and that I am worthy in his eyes. Not in my eyes, and maybe not in some other people's eyes, but in God's eyes, I'm worthy.
I love that. That's really great. I read this thing. A friend in the program turned me on to this book called "Around the Sun" with Emmett Fox. And one of the things he talks about, because I'm just at the start of the year and I started it last June, so I never did January before, but it's like God isn't loving, God is love, right? And God isn't honest, God is truth. And so when you look at it like that, it's like with something so infinite and great, there's no comparative. It's just is. And I thought that for myself that was an interesting way to hear it and to consider it. Um, yeah, so true freedom isn't loving myself not because I am perfect, but because I am worthy of loving exactly as I am. Can I set the intention to speak to myself with the same kindness and patience I would offer my best friend after they made a mistake? Quite frankly, I do believe that I'm with Darrin on this. That is might be it'd be that is something that I'm literally almost praying for willingness for. To give myself the same grace that I afford others. And in fact, in my morning prayers, I literally added grace. That I'm praying for gratitude for grace, because what I realized is that my grace had conditions. My grace had limitations, and therefore it really wasn't grace, you know? And so it it's so crazy how the different people that I have on this podcast and get to talk to, they happen in certain orders where it just kind of brings this awareness and enlightenment in different ways, like, about learning about grace and then coming and talking about mistakes. Like the two, it's like fettuccine and Alfredo, like they're so perfectly. But yeah, I just feel that it really led for me to greater introspection upon the conditions that I'm putting inside grace, inside myself, and really the limitations that I'm putting on my own higher power. you know and I'll
No,
leave
that's
that one
that's
there.
great. That's great, Milan. Yeah, the limitations. And so think about this. You made me think about something, and it's sort of out of the box. So you have to stay with me for a second. But
Yeah.
so you remember in the book where he's talking about the guy, he takes a drink, and then after he drinks, he's like, well, what's the point now? And he just goes on and just gets obliterated, right? And I often think, well, what if that guy just would have had the one drink and stopped and came right back in the program, right? Or whatever, you know? And so, and then that's irrelevant because we don't have the choice. And once I kick off the phenomenon of craving, blah, blah, blah. But what it made me think of is, isn't that how our disease works, even in sobriety, right? So I make a mistake, right? What God wants me to do is forgive myself, show myself mercy, have the awareness, talk to my sponsor, grow, and move on. What the disease wants me to do is get into self pity, I'm worthless, blah, 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 so that I continue to make more and more mistakes. And so the disease is trying to pull me down that path of making more mistakes because, wow, what does it matter anyways? I made the mistake now. I might as well just keep on, you know. And so it's that whole mentality, right? And so it's exactly what you said. It limits my growth if I can't forgive myself and let myself off the hook and get back on the beam, if you will. Right. So I'm
Yeah.
really glad you said that.
Yeah, and quite frankly, like for me, the awareness of it came about because what I realized is, there was certain defects and shortcomings in mine that weren't going anywhere because I hadn't started forgiving myself for them from the past. You know, like it literally was a self-imposed limitation that it was creating.
Yeah. No,
Is
that's
it?
great.
It's your question now, right?
Yeah. My question. What do I do if others make mistakes that affect me?
Well, okay. So this, they say 95% of your problems are your top three defects, right? And in my first round of steps, intolerance and lack of acceptance of others was like they were in the top three. And so what I felt like I was doing was I was blaming a lot of the results of my emotions on other people's mistakes, and I tried to do that to a much smaller degree these days, but I can't say I'm perfect. That would be bullshit. And I see, quite frankly, that I've yet to see someone fully transgress that one into like, ooh, perfection. Like tell me there isn't a day where some interaction with your wife, your kid, whatever, and you're in a different emotional state. And we would literally be truly enlightened if we weren't. But what that was doing for me was that I was, first of all, putting blame on them for my emotional state or situation in my life. I was also making them feel like they were wrong. And I feel like with my daughter, that was the worst damage. That, if I still have regrets, it's probably greatest about that. Teaching her in certain ways when she was younger that she was wrong. Because that feeling of self-worth, that feeling of safety, that should be something that the parent provides. And because the rest of the world can beat our kids up, dude. We don't need to. you know and emotional abuse is worse than physical. It's in some ways for me, and I'm not belittling anybody's physical abuse, like straight up. But now, what I find, to be honest, is that I can forgive Darrin's mistakes way faster than Milan's. Like I'm using my step 10. I'm using my awareness to see where I'm being judgmental, to see where I'm being lack of accepting and lack of tolerance. And I really, really am not carrying it. Like I'm trying so hard not to carry it now because, like Chuck C says, like I can't afford it. I cannot afford to just be in a state of resentment because I just really don't want to die again. You know,
Too much paperwork, right?
but I don't even know what the paperwork for full death is, but I know what it is to die and come back, and it's certainly not awesome.
What do I do if others make mistakes that affect me? And I love that he puts in the book tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints make us more useful, right? And
Mm.
so shortcomings is when people make mistakes. And so I'm a why guy, right? I don't know if you are or not, Milan, but I want to know, okay, why do I have to do this? Okay, this is the why. Okay, I'll do it. I like to know why. And so God showed me a why one time. So I want to tell you the story, and I'm going to keep all the names out to protect the guilty, right? So, um, so anyways, this was years ago. One of my friends was posting. This is a good friend of mine. Been in the program a long time. I really care about this individual. Was posting some political stuff on Facebook, which I have since left Facebook because it's not inherent to my spiritual growth, right? But that's another story. But at this time, I was there, and these his viewpoints and his shortcomings were starting to affect me. And you know how we get, Milan. I'm like, oh, I can't believe he said that, and he's doing this. I'm gonna put this out here and really roast him over this on in front of everybody. And then something came over me, and my higher power was like, no, that's not what we do. So I just let it all go. Why do I tell this story? Because like 3 months later, we're at the meeting, and this same individual comes up to me, and he's struggling with something. He says, hey, can I talk to you? I need somebody to talk to. And I sat out in the parking lot and talked to him for 30 minutes. And I think that I helped him, Milan. And so do you catch that? This is what he says. Let me read it again. We feel that tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints are attitudes that make us more useful to them. So do you see the why, Milan? If I would have let myself take over and blasted him out, he wouldn't have came up to me at that meeting and asked and wanted to talk to me. I would have lost
Mm.
my usefulness to my fellow man. God would not have been able to use me to help others. And so that's the why. That's why I have to forgive other people's mistakes. That other person may need me in 6 months. It may be your daughter, whoever it is, may need you, but yet you won't forgive the mistake. And so now you've cut yourself off from being available. Because the book says my main purpose of this whole program is to fit myself to be of maximum service to God and my fellows. Well, if I'm not forgiving their mistakes, I'm not going to be able to be of maximum service to them. Right. And so I have to learn to forgive other people's mistakes. Now, with that being said, we have healthy boundaries. If somebody is abusing me, that's a whole nother different thing. I set up a healthy boundary and I'm not a part of that. But when people just make mistakes, I have to forgive them because God may use me to help that person later, and I may block that chance to be helpful if I don't forgive them, with that. And then the second thing, Milan, and this is, I think, one of the things that really helped me the most in the literature when I was going through the steps. It's like, how am I going to have others forgive me if I'm not willing to forgive them? Because see, that's the alcoholic addict paradigm is please forgive me, Milan, but I'm not going to forgive you. It's like, that's the way I live my whole life. I want everybody to give me grace and forgiveness, but I'm not showing any and giving any. No, that's not the way the world works. If I want people to forgive me of my shortcomings and my mixed up viewpoints, then I need to be willing to forgive others of their shortcomings. And so it's a reciprocal thing, right? Because I want people to forgive me when I mess up, then I have to forgive you when you mess up, right?
I love that. You ready for a question?
Yes, sir.
NA reminds us that we never have to use again, but it doesn't say we will never make another mistake. Does it bring you peace to realize that your worth is not tied to your performance, but to your willingness to keep surrendering?
Wow. I don't know. I still struggle with that sometimes, like especially with a job or something that's what defines me and what my worth is. And I have to remind myself, no, that's not true. My worth is what God thinks of me. My worth is how I'm living spiritually for my higher power. But I do get caught up in that sometime, Milan, of thinking my worth comes from whether I'm doing good or not, or my job, or all these things. And I have to break out of that mental thought process and say, you know what, man, I'm worthy because God says I'm worthy, right? I'm doing what he wants me to do. My self-worth is not based on achievements or the things that I'm doing or not doing. My self-worth is based on the power that loves me, that forgave me, that set me here on this path of recovery. And if I can stay focused on that, look at how my higher power feels about me instead of what I'm doing or not, then I'm usually in a pretty good spot.
Ooh, I love that. Okay, does it bring me peace to realize that my worth is not tied to my performance, but to my willingness to keep surrendering? You know, the days that I can really bring myself to a state of love and get into a state of surrender in the morning, um, I'm not even questioning my worth. You know, it's when I'm disconnected from the universe and the present moment that all that weird anxiety shows up. You know, it just doesn't come, like being in that state of serenity and surrender and love. Like one of the things for me in the last couple months is that I really realized that, love isn't a series of acts to me. Like love is this a state, just like serenity. And when I can bring that state into my heart, then all my actions are loving. And so, I don't when I'm criticizing my self-worth, that is not an act of love. I am not in the state of love. And so it's about trying to get myself to that state, and like we've said in other podcasts, gratitude is one of the things that can help me get to that state. Um, and really, quite frankly, for me, rest. You know, getting rest, feeling healthy, feeling rested. Yesterday was so my wife and I are doing this low cholesterol eating now, and every 2 weeks I'm giving myself like a day off. And so yesterday was a friend of ours' 80th birthday, and the birthday party theme was baked goods. So I went to this party where there was like 20 kinds of baked goods out. Like, and Milan was a piggy. I put on 7 pounds yesterday, dude. Yeah, I'm not kidding. It was absolutely ridiculous. But what I felt though, like, even before the end of the day, like when you start treating yourself really well, any deviation from actual love, like putting shitty food into you, holy moly. Like, did it ever feel like an act of not love? Like this morning, I was so happy to go back to the good diet because I just woke up with like sugar hangover and just inside my guts not feeling good. And and so yeah, it I feel that that feeling of self-worth is tied to my state of love inside myself. I'll leave that there.
I love, yeah, I love that, Milan. I love that you use that word surrender because I think literally that's what the whole program rests on. I mean, every
Yeah.
aspect of everything. I mean, he says it says at the beginning of step 3 that the first requirement is that I be convinced that any life run on self will is not going to be successful, right? So the
Hmm.
first requirement is that I surrender all of these things, right? And so the surrender to my higher power. Okay, I'm turning my will over to yours. I'm going to go back to eating healthy. Whatever it is that I'm doing his will instead of mine, I'm doing the what's loving instead of what I want to do. That surrender is what keeps me on the path. And I heard something a few weeks ago that was it shook me a little bit because I've been around here a little while and didn't think about it like this, but we always say, talk about acceptance. Acceptance is the answer. I've got to accept this thing. But we forget that the serenity doesn't come from the acceptance. The serenity comes from God. See, God grant me the serenity. When I surrender to God, He gives me the serenity. Then I can accept the situation. Well, no wonder my whole life before I got here was wrong. I'm trying to get the acceptance so I can have the serenity. No,
Me
that's not the way
too.
it works. I have it backwards.
Mm,
I surrender to God. I
mm,
follow God. God gives me the serenity, and then I can accept whatever situation that's going on around me. I just thought that was very interesting.
Absolutely, man. For me, it was like last February where I realized I had the serenity prayer backwards. I was like, okay, man, I need this acceptance. Going to give me serenity. And I was like, and it's just not the case. It's not the case. And quite frankly, that's what I was talking about, that epitome with love, is that love's the same way. Like fake being selfishly false about loving acts is not going to bring love into your heart. But bringing love into your heart will make you have genuine loving acts.
Yeah, no, and I
Mm,
remember, and it all ties this. And now all the stuff that I heard all my life all starts to make sense, Milan, because I remember
mhm,
a sermon before I even got into recovery, and the pastor's talking about you're not going to ever change your heart and your mind, right? You're not going to change your heart by the mind, right?
mhm,
Right? Because I'm thinking, okay, when I feel like doing this, then I'll go do it, right? I had it backwards. When I just start doing it, right,
mhm,
then I start feeling like it. When I just act on the heart, then the mind follows. Right? It's just like what we're talking about. It's like I had everything so backwards, right? When I just do the thing, when I just have the love, and then the attitudes change, then the mind follows, then I get the acceptance, all that afterwards. So
mhm.
that's how we all ended up here. We had everything backwards in our life, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All
Okay, you
right.
got
So it's
another
my
question
question,
for me?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is my last question. What happens if we don't learn from our mistakes?
Well, quite simply, we don't grow. I think if we don't learn from our mistakes, we are destined to make them again. Um, I think if we don't learn from our mistakes, are we really doing step 10? Like, are we running our program? I I think for me, as the type of addict, alcoholic that I am, not learning from my mistakes is a very dangerous thing. If it's just over and over, especially ones that are unprincipled, in a way that is really just keeping me in my old behavior, or like, when you're saying in the behavior, not my old behavior. Yeah, I think for me, boy, when you say what happens if we don't, gosh, it just makes me feel danger. And I'm not really sure how else to explain that. But I just think um, that there's a good chance, as alcoholics and addicts, that you're going to be pointed towards a relapse if you're just doing the same thing. If nothing changes, nothing changes.
And that's exactly right, Milan. The book actually is very clear. I mean, if you ever want to know how to relapse, right? The book tells you how to relapse. It says, what if Darrin makes a mistake? What if Darrin messes up? Does that mean he's going to go use again? Not necessarily so. If Darrin is truly sorry for what he's done and continues to try to do better, we think that Darrin will be forgiven and will be okay. But if Darrin continues to hurt people, Darrin will most surely drink again. That's what the literature says. So you're 100% right. It tells us if I continue to hurt people, if I continue to live in these mistakes, I'm going to go relapse again, right? If I make a mistake and I'm sorry for it and I'm trying to learn from it and I'm growing and I try to get back on the beam, then God's going to forgive me and keep me on that path. But if I just continue to hurt people, then my destiny is probably relapse, exactly what you just said. But to answer the question, what happens if we don't learn from our mistakes? You said it just exactly right. We'll repeat them again. Because here's the thing, Milan, I have a higher power who loves me enough to let me fall on my face over and over and over again until I get up and turn it back towards him. Right. So in the big book that I read, it says God disciplines those he loves. Right. In the big book we read, right, we let God discipline us in the way we just outlined. What was the way we just outlined? Because I'm burning things up, I'm messing things up. And so I sort of look at it like this cosmic picture of God sitting up there going, okay, keep doing it your way. Keep feeling the pain. And when you get in enough pain, come back and do it my way, right? And so you're exactly right. We're just going to keep repeating these things over because God is trying to help us grow, help us learn, and we're not getting the we're not getting with the program, right? And so he'll just to keep allowing more pain. And man, I have experienced that, Milan, in so many aspects of my life. Like not even that in with drugs and alcohol, like with finances, we've talked about this before. I had bankruptcy, right? And so I got in enough pain and then I did something, but I didn't do enough. And so then I got in some credit card debt and got in some more pain. And then I did some changes. And it's this series of pain. It's a series of surrenders that now has gotten me in a place where we have some degree of handle on our finances, right? And so because God cares enough to allow me to keep falling so that I can get back up and use that pain as the motivator to turn back to Him and continue to grow.
Ooh, oh, it's amazing. Ready for another question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the Living Clean describes recovery as a path of discovery, where every wrong turn helps clarify the right one. Can you find the heart to love the wrong turns in your journey, trusting that they are all leading you back to a deeper surrender?
Wow, that's a great question. So I came across this poem. I really wish I would have thought about finding it and so I could read it word for word. It's an old Chinese proverb, right? Where it's like, I don't know if you've heard it before, where it's like, the guy's horse ran away and the neighbor came and was like, "Oh, that's terrible. Your horse ran away." And he said, "Maybe." And then the next day, the horse came back with two other horses. And the neighbor came over and was like, "That's great. You've got three horses." And he said, "Maybe." And the next day, his son was out trying to break one of the horses and fell off the horse and broke his leg. And the neighbor came and was like, "Hey, man, that's horrible that happened to your son." He said, "Maybe." And then a month later, the military started drafting all young men to go into war, but the son had a broken leg, so he couldn't be drafted. And the neighbor came over and said, "Man, that's great." And he said, "Maybe." Do you get it, Milan? I don't
Yeah,
ever know. I don't know. It's
yeah.
just exactly what your question
Mhm.
said. I don't know if this is a problem or not a problem. There's no such thing as a problem, Milan, ever. It's a situation that I have amplified into a problem because of my fear or unfaith or whatever. But
Mm.
it's just a situation. I don't know if that situation is going to be good or bad. It's just like you talked about that on that podcast about your house burning down. Right at the
Yeah,
time, that seemed horrible, but it was great for you. Just like my relapse, it seemed horrible, but it was great for me. So they're just situations. And so that's
the
the first thing
lessons
that I
and the
have to,
blessings. The lessons and the
yes,
blessings.
lessons and the blessings. And so the first thing I have to do, Milan, is stop trying to label things problems or not problems.
Mm.
They're just situations. Okay. And what can I do to get through this situation? What is God trying to teach me? What am I trying to learn? What do I need to do better to get through this situation and stop labeling everything
Mm.
problems or not problems and just use them, like you said, as an opportunity for growth? Right. I don't
Mm.
cuss much, so I'm not going to tell you what this means in full terms, but my sponsor said it's an AFGO. It's another effing growth opportunity, right? That's what my sponsor always said. But he uses the actual word. That's fine.
Yeah.
But no, but it's true. These situations are just growth opportunities for me to try to do better and grow and learn.
I listened to a lot about surrender this year, and one of the guys who has a lot out there on it is Michael Singer. The
Mm.
untethered soul and the surrender experiment. And he talks about preference, it's removing your preference from a situation. That's really what the act of surrender is. Right. And so, much like that farmer you were talking about, right? Is it good? Is it bad? Well, is more horses good? Is a son with a hurt leg bad? There's always such potential for a future twist in life. Like not only a potential, there's always a consistency in life having such twists that we could never be the puppeteer and anticipate how something's going to turn out. And so, can I find the heart to love the wrong turns in my journey, trusting that they're all leading me back to a deeper surrender? And I'm starting to, I'm starting to more than I ever did before. Like before, it was zero, right? I had my house burned down. I had to have back surgery, leave my career. I had to, like, there's been a lot of twists and turns in my life, and I'm not unique on that. But the one thing for sure is that I am looking back at these turning points and seeing the lessons and the blessings from the result of them. And that was something that I hadn't necessarily done in my past before, was really bring an awareness about, like what, and I'm not living in the past either, but I do look at the past, I look at the past as a template for me to see what worked or what didn't for myself, right? And one thing that didn't work was dwelling on something negatively that turned out to be a blessing. That never worked, ever. And all it did, as much as worrying is praying for something bad to happen, right? Just sitting there putting myself in a shitty mood because I'm the victim. Victimizing myself is something that I just don't want to do for the rest of my life. I spent enough of my life in a pity party that that's enough for me, you know?
And
Um,
it reminds me of the in the back of the book where it says nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. Now, let me clarify that. If I'm in God's world, nothing is happening by mistake. But if I'm in Darren's world, then everything's happening by mistake.
yeah,
But if I'm in God's world, everything is happening exactly the way it's supposed to, Milan. Exactly
yeah,
what we're talking about this whole podcast. I'm a month sober. My wife is filing for divorce. She's taking my little girl, and I'm doing the deal. I'm living in God's world, and I have this preference, though, that you just talked about, that we get back together and I have my daughter in my life. That's my preference. So this is a problem. I've created it to problem because it's not going the way I want it to go. And these guys told me, trust God, trust God. Nothing happens but by mistake in God's world. It's going to all work out the way it's supposed to. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you, Milan, and tell you that I believe them. And I'm like, oh, I trust God. I didn't. I still wanted my daughter back and all that, blah, blah, blah. But 20 years later, my daughter's in college now, and I'm remarried to a wonderful woman. Her mother is remarried. My daughter is great. Everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to, Milan. God
yeah,
already knew. And so, what I want to leave the people out there that are listening to this podcast
yeah.
with, right, is in the book it says, I serve an infinite God. I trust an infinite God rather than my finite self. And what that means is, at that time in 2006, all I could see is my situation, the
Mm,
divorce, her taking my daughter, because I'm finite.
mm,
Infinite means that in 2006, my higher power saw 2026 and saw exactly where it was going to be, right?
mm,
He's all knowing. He's infinite. So he already knew. He had a plan for me, right?
mm.
It's not a mistake. Everything is happening exactly the way it is. And I don't think I would be here, and I surely wouldn't be happy had things not unfolded
Yeah.
God's way instead of the way I wanted them to unfold.
Exactly. And I don't think that, we can anticipate all the lessons. And I just, much as our discomfort that caused us to drink and do drugs, was created by our perception, very much of it was created by our preference and how we thought the universe should be. So, our interpretations of mistakes might in itself be mistakes. I'll leave that there for my part. And I just want to say, Darrin, man, today has felt like we're just growing inside this together, and I'm really enjoying our time together. I want to thank you for coming back. Hopefully, once we sign off, we'll bring up for our next one, and say thank you. I love you, brother.
Thank you, brother. I love you. It's always a pleasure being on your show, and I get some growth out of it as well. And then my hope is that God uses this to help other people grow as well.
Yeah, and it definitely, oddly enough, we had a large amount of people from Singapore last month watching.
Oh,
So
cool.
anyway, shout out to Singapore and everybody out there. Tune in next episode for more recovery fun. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.
I love you. Mm. Please help us help others. If you'd like what you've seen here today, please subscribe and share this podcast and help us get to 100 followers. We're looking for interaction with our audience. So please email recoveryfreedomrising@gmail.com or contact Milan South Okanagan Starcic on Facebook with questions, topic suggestions, or just comments. We'd love to hear from you.